Well, hello and welcome to our groundbreaking series of Fred Talks on marketing practice. Our story begins thousands of years ago, and our hero is called Fred. Fred is a caveman, named after a legendary caveman of the 1960s, Fred Flintstone, the second most successful cartoon hero in TV history, exceeded in popularity only by Homer Simpson. And Fred has something in common with Homer. He's every man. For our purposes, he's every man faced with a need to solve his problem in that most basic of societies, the prehistoric society without TV, internet, business schools, and universities. Despite this, he uses his intuition, something we all have, to solve a problem, build a business, generate income, create and build a brand of measurable value. Fred shows we can all do marketing and make a better life for ourselves and others. So our hero is Fred, and our fable follows him into prehistory. In my cave, Fred is, like most of his contemporary cave dwellers, primarily a hunter. We pick up Fred's story at a time when he's aging a bit, putting on a bit of weight, slowing down. Happens to all of us, believe me. So he doesn't have as much success as a hunter anymore. Fred's cunning. He knows where the bison are, but he runs slow. What Fred needs is a partner, a younger neighbor who runs fast but doesn't know the territory. And his neighbor, let's call him Elvis, fits the bill. Runs fast, very, very fast. A challenge. Fred knows that without speed, no game to fill the pot, no food, starvation time, time for an exchange of values. Elvis's speed, value 1, for Fred's know-how, value 2. Fred sets out to control the exchange of values. In Fred's head, I want something from you of value to me, your speed as a hunting partner. How do I get it? I have to give you something in return of value to you. What might you want of value to you? Knowledge of where the game is. And Fred starts to offer it. I have it. Here is what I have. It is precisely what you want. Knowledge of where the game is. Let's exchange my knowledge for your speed. The exchange takes place. They hunt, they win, they eat, they make a partnership. Brand Fred is born. Our hero, Caveman Fred, is in serious trouble. He hunts, but very occasionally. He can't keep up with his fit young neighbor, Elvis, anymore. No hunting, no food. No hunting, no skins for clothing. No hunting means a serious decline in Fred's standard of living. His devoted wife is no longer the homecoming queen, princess, and cheerleader he married long ago. She nags him mercilessly. Verbal abuse is born in a cave. Children cry all the time. Everyone is hungry. Fred does manage to keep the family warm. He's taken up knitting in the evenings and makes them cozy sweaters, so they don't get cold, but they are very, very hungry. Elvis, meanwhile, who you may recall runs faster than a speeding bullet, is keen of eye, and throws a mean spear as well, has learnt all there is to know from Fred about bison and how to hunt them. Elvis's larder is full, his family well fed. Elvis has enough bison meat to feed an army of Neanderthals, all stored in his cave. I know what you're thinking, and you know what's going on in Fred's mind. Time for an exchange of values. But there's a problem. Elvis has food, Fred needs food, but Elvis isn't going to give him his surplus food for nothing. Brand Fred is a hunter, but now he's a rubbish hunter. He now has no hunting prowess to offer, no value to offer in exchange for Elvis's food. But an exchange of values is needed. Food for what? What can Fred offer Elvis in exchange for his grub? But Fred has noticed one thing. Elvis shivers a lot when they get together for their monthly bison barbecue. While Fred sits warm and cozy in his knitted sweater, Elvis has a skinny loincloth wrapped around his middle, and about midnight, even with a blazing campfire, Elvis starts to turn a nasty shade of blue. An idea takes shape in Fred's mind. Is there something familiar about the following process of thought and action? You might note that the word want has changed to need. No matter, same process as before. Fred analyzes the situation. I need something from Elvis of value to me, his surplus food. How do I get it? I have to give him something in return of value to him. What might Elvis need of value to him? A warm garment, a sweater perhaps. I knit great sweaters and could knit one for Elvis. And Fred offers the sweater. I have what you need, Elvis. Here is what I have. It's precisely what you need, a warm sweater knitted by me. Let's exchange your food for my sweater. Elvis accepts. The exchange of values takes place. In no time at all, Fred knits a thick brown sweater, Elvis's favorite color. Elvis hands over bison steaks. Fred hands over the sweater. The exchange of values, quite concrete values this time, is made. Win-win. Warm Elvis, well-fed Fred and family, everyone satisfied, and brand Fred has taken a step forward into a new market. Fred is running out of food again. The cave cupboard is bare, his neighbour Elvis's bison steaks are a distant memory, no hunting for Fred in weeks. Food is scarce, Fred and the family face starvation again. Things are getting tense. But Fred is not without ingenuity. He's exchanged a sweater for food once, so why not do it again? Fred's a quick knitter. He can whip up a sweater in no time. But Elvis already has a brown sweater, and brown is Elvis's favourite colour. To get his hands on a value, Elvis's food, and Elvis the Star Hunter has of course once again a larder stuffed with bison steaks, Fred has once again to offer Elvis something of value to Elvis, and a second brown sweater doesn't fit the bill. Fred, however, keeps his eyes open, and he's noticed that Elvis is quite fastidious in his dress. He likes to dress appropriately for the occasion. His only daughter is to wed soon, and will of course be dressed in white, as will the bride's father. Cave weddings are very formal. Surely Fred could use a white sweater. It'll be a long party. It'll last into the night. Fred has not forgotten that Elvis feels the cold. He will need a sweater, and brown won't do at his daughter's wedding. Fred is convinced that a white Fred sweater will do the trick. White sweater for food. So here we go again. Fred controls the exchange. I need something of value from Elvis. His surplus food. What value might Elvis need? A white sweater for cold weddings. I have what you need. A smart, warm white sweater knitted by me. Let's exchange your food for my sweater. The exchange of values will be made. Controlled by Fred. Food for white sweater. But as Fred is knitting his latest piece of cave haute couture, a thought occurs to him. Fred's pretty proud of his knits. He takes care with measuring, sizing, choosing good wool, dyeing and bleaching. These sweaters aren't just ordinary sweaters. These are Fred sweaters, and they are special. As Fred's usually modest bosom swells with pride, he says to himself, it would be a shame if all those people at the party didn't know who knitted this beauty. Elvis is father of the bride. Everyone will be looking at him. Well, of course, his daughter gets a look in from time to time, but Elvis will be a centre of attention. So says Fred, I will sew a label on the sweater, in case anyone is interested in who knitted it, and the label will say, a Fred sweater. The label is stitched on the sweater. Elvis wears it to the party. People admire the white sweater, and some note the label. Brand Fred has taken another step forward. Well, how are we getting on with the building of Brand Fred? Brand Fred is coming to life. Fred, the intuitive marketer, has controlled a couple of value exchanges. Food for a sweater, twice. He's done so by setting objectives. To secure food in exchange for a Fred sweater. He's done so by identifying the value that Elvis, his target, his counterparty, his customer, his consumer, wants to part with his value, food. He has produced the value that Elvis needs. He's communicated to Elvis that he has what Elvis needs, a sweater, and he has persuaded Elvis to exchange his value, food, for Fred's value, a sweater, and he's done it twice. The second time he's labelled the sweater. The sweater is branded a Fred sweater. We can already discern a process, the creation of a brand. A brand faces Janus-like in two directions. It has value for one class of stakeholder, customers, consumers, etc., who see value in the brand for themselves, and it has value for another class of stakeholder, the owner of the brand. How does Brand Fred stack up on these counts? Brand Fred has some value to Elvis. He's the only customer so far for Fred sweaters, the product class in which Brand Fred plays. 2 Brand Fred sweaters have graced Elvis's torso, and he's pretty pleased with them. You might say that another sweater with a Brand Fred label will likely please Elvis. He's predisposed to swap food for a Fred sweater on a future occasion. Brand Fred, for this reason, already has some value to its owner, to Fred. The next sweater he knits and labels Brand Fred will be more likely to be seen as a value worth acquiring in any future exchange of values. But Brand Fred is very young indeed, a baby, an embryo even at this stage. So let's follow the brand to its next stage. There were a lot of guests at Elvis's daughter's wedding. Elvis is well connected, and several of them remarked on Elvis's splendid white sweater, and noted that Elvis did not turn blue with cold during the speeches, which were of course interminable. Cave weddings are no different from 21st century weddings, alas. Some of the admirers of the white sweater noted the label, and a few even came up to Fred and said, "Did you really knit that beauty, Fred?" And even,
might you knit one for me? It just so happened that one of the admirers was Fred's landlord, who shall be known as George. Now this matters. With no significant hunting income recently, Fred has fallen into arrears with his rent. The family is now well fed, but is facing eviction from their cosy cave. Time for an exchange of value, thinks our budding brand manager. A brand Fred sweater for George in exchange for a year's rent. You can imagine the conversation. I want a year rent-free in my cave, George. You want a sweater. What colour is your favourite? I have your sweater. Let's exchange. The exchange is made. The landlord wears a brand Fred sweater everywhere. The brand is now off and running. Is anyone thinking what Fred is thinking? Two well-connected and well-off cave citizens are now walking around Cave Town in brand Fred sweaters. They recognize the value to them of a brand Fred sweater, so a brand Fred sweater is proved to have value to its customers, and not incidentally, value to Fred in the exchange of food and rent. Might that value to Fred not grow in repeated exchanges? The cave community is full of prosperous neighbors. They all wear loincloths, they all get cold at night, and they all want to look good. And they all have values Fred would like to get his hands on. One collects wood for fires, another turns clay into pots, a third makes furniture, another rents out deluxe caves, way better than Fred's. They have built-in wood-burning stoves and dishwashers, sweaters for firewood, sweaters for plates and jugs, sweaters for furnishings, and sweaters for the wife's dream house. A whole series of value exchanges looms before Fred's dreamy eyes. Fred the marketer starts his campaign. No internet, no TV, face-to-face. One by one he starts with the firewood king. I need firewood for my cave. You want a sweater. I have your sweater. Let's exchange. But disaster strikes. Tom, the firewood dude, says, cool idea, Fred, but I just got offered a sweater by your competitor. His sweaters look good. Why should I exchange my precious firewood for your sweater? He got here first, and he says I can have my sweater next week when he's knitted it. Another cave dweller has seen how Fred does his sweater business. Reckons sweater knitting is straightforward. He's about to screw up all Fred's dreams. It's not fair, but it is, and always has been, what we call business. On the other hand, Fred has learned one eternal lesson. There always is, and always will be, competition. But Fred is made of sterner stuff than you might think. His motto is, when the going gets tough, the tough get going, so going Fred gets. Now listen here, Tom, old friend. What I'm offering is no ordinary sweater. I'm offering you a Fred sweater. Every sweater I offer you carries the Fred label, and the Fred label is a guarantee of certain qualities. The colour is precisely the colour you want. The wool is the finest wool from young woolly mammoths. The weave is tight and cold-resistant, and you order today and get it tomorrow. Only a brand Fred sweater does all these things for you. This is precisely what you want. No competitor can offer you what a brand Fred sweater offers you. Ask Elvis. Ask Tom, the landlord. Brand Fred sweater for your firewood. Value for value. Let's exchange. Which, of course, they do. A critical brand Fred lesson has been learned in the context of competition, but it will turn out to be the secret of brand Fred's sustainable success. Fred's business is booming. He and the family have moved into a rented deluxe cave. The larder has food, the furnishings are of the finest, the log burner is bursting with wood, and Fred's old cave is now a warehouse with a good stock of Fred brand sweaters. Each time a sweater is sold, Fred makes it clear why a Fred sweater is preferable to any other sweater on offer. Why a Fred sweater has more value to the customer. Fred's intuitive marketing is bringing home the bacon, the bison steaks, the wood, and the high life in a cool cave. An important question. We know his sweaters have value for Fred in exchanges. We know his sweaters have value for his growing bank of customers. But what's the value of brand Fred, the name on the label? What is the brand worth? Well, we're about to find out, because on a bright frosty morning, Fred falls under a bus. Well, no, of course, prehistoric cave towns don't have buses, but that's not the point. Fred is no more. Fred has demised. He is, to quote the 1969 Monty Python Dead Parrot sketch, an ex-Fred. And so, Mrs. Fred, until now a quiet Neanderthal housewife, cooking, cleaning, caring for the children, and generally doing a highly effective but discreet job of cave-keeping, moves to centre stage. And centre stage is not a comfortable place to be. The rent is due, the larder won't last long, it's very cold, and the wood is going to run out soon. Mrs. Fred faces eviction, starvation, and the prospect of her family freezing to death. Not a pretty prospect, and no Fred. No Fred to get her out of the hole, and worse still, no Fred to blame for her woes. But Mrs. Fred has two things which can save the day. She has a lot of sweaters, a warehouse full, not a very large warehouse, but it is full of sweaters, all labelled a Fred sweater, and she owns that brand. Brand Fred was left to her in Fred's will. She also has Fred's notes. Fred kept accounts and recorded other musings on tablets of stone. On one she found Fred's guiding motto, "When the going gets tough, the tough get going," and on another she found he had chipped out some text. Some copy for an advertisement he was thinking of running in the local newsstones. Every Fred sweater is knitted in the colour of your choice. Every Fred sweater is knitted from finest mammoth wool and tight woven against the cold. A Fred sweater comes with 24-hour delivery guarantee. Mrs. Fred quickly grasped the secret of Fred's success. It is those words repeated to each and every buyer that persuades them to exchange their values for a Fred sweater in preference to any other sweater. Out of the cave she strides with sweaters in one hand and Fred's words in the other. The sweaters are exchanged over and over again. Brand Fred has serious liftoff. There are triumphs ahead, but also pitfalls. Once again, things are not good for Mrs. Fred. Fred is now long gone. Long gone, too, are the sweaters Fred knitted. Mrs. Fred faces an empty warehouse, starving children all over again, eviction, a mini ice age, and no Fred. Worse still, no sweaters. What does she have? She has nothing. Well, wrong. She has the brand. She owns Brand Fred, and now that really matters. Is Brand Fred worth anything? Time to find out. Remember that sneaky dude who cropped up in part 5? We never actually met him, but he tried to mess up Fred's fledgling sweater business by offering his customers an alternative sweater competition. Fred saw him off by emphasizing the unique and different qualities of Brand Fred sweaters. We now find out the competition was called Gordon. We discover he's been living hand to mouth ever since, but he didn't skip town. And Gordon knows how to knit. One very frosty morning, Mrs. Fred is standing by her soon-to-be-abandoned cave, wondering what to do next, when Gordon just happens to stop by. "Heard you might be short of sweaters," he says. "And you can't knit, but I can. However, I've been all round the village offering my clobber, and all they want is Brand Fred sweaters." Brand Fred has become the sweater standard of the village. Now, you have Brand Fred, I have sweaters, or could knit sweaters. I have the skill, I have the kit. Is there a deal to be made? Now, Mrs. Fred is desperate, but not dim. She sees the opportunity, but she is cautious. Okay, you can knit, but can you knit to the quality of Fred sweaters? Can you knit the colours that our customers like? Can you knit high-grade woolly mammoth wool? And can you knit tight and warm for the new ice age? Can you knit for 24-hour delivery? Well, Gordon can. Gordon knits. Every sweater is up to Fred's specification. Every sweater carries a label, a Fred sweater. Customers exchange over and over again. Mrs. Fred eats again and lives happily ever after in her deluxe cave. She is also now Mrs. Gordon. All that is left of Fred is a bank of memories, some stone tablets, and a very valuable brand. Its value recognized by its many satisfied customers, and its value appreciated by Mrs. Gordon and the children, who will in due course inherit the brand. The brand will live forever, delivering sweater after sweater, labelled Fred, and sold as offering your favourite colour, woolly mammoth wool, tight knit for extra warmth, and 24-hour delivery. No internet, no TV, no consultants, no experts, no business schools, no marketing. Or is that right? If marketing is a toolkit to build value, and that value resides in a brand, was it not marketing which created and built the value of Brand Fred? If not the methodical marketing of the modern era, at least the intuitive marketing of the thousands of years that preceded it. We will deconstruct the building of Brand Fred as an exemplar of intuitive marketing. Come and join us.